Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to have you with us today. Terry, how's the sound with you, my friend? Everything good? Everyone hear me all right? Type something into the question box and let me know, will you? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. No one's hearing me yet. We're live? Not yet. Okay.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to our friends in the northern parts of Australia. Good afternoon to the rest of the world. If you're not in Queensland, and good afternoon to our friends in New Zealand. Also, great. Thank you, Eric. Eric in Dubai. Sound check in Dubai is okay at 05:30 a.m. Good on you, mate. Lovely to hear from you. And thank you, Terry. Lovely to have all of you folks with us today. As usual, always a pleasure to see you. And I want to especially thank Terry Knight today, folks. If you look at our nice, lovely banner for today, War versus Social, Terry did that as he does all of our banners. He does a mighty job for us, and he's a very talented gentleman and very creative. Which is something I always appreciate. Eric, hello to you, my friend. We've got, lots of people with us here. Lots of people trying to get in too. Chase, New Year's resolution, Chase. We're going to give up cigarettes in the next few months. Adrian Lee, happy to have you with us, Adrian. I'm about to send you an email, and I got your correspondence. Thank you, Alan. Keen's doing a tutorial. Alan Varian up there in Brisbane has done tutorials. Albert, Daniel, David Volker, Dave Webby, my good friend, Webby, the king of the black lines. Hello, Marvino, SoCal, eh? That's the place, the home of the Liberals, they tell me. Eric, couple of Erics, 3 Erics, Shamati and Trotter and Kent and Greg and Chip Stevenson. Chip, lovely to have you with us, my friend. Terrific. And Hank down there in the Hunter Valley, Harold up there in Reading, Harold the Gold King, King of the Gold Bugs. Jen, if you're a female, particularly welcome. We don't get a lot of ladies on the Daniel Code. We'd love to have ladies, the more the better. You're most welcome. Tell your friends. We'll teach you how to trade, make lots of money whenever you're ready. John L. down there in Coffs Harbour. Justin's down there with his dad in the Hunter. Mark doing a tutorial at the moment. Marvina, Marilyn, always happy to see Marilyn. Lord, Mike, we've got to talk to you soon. Mike, big Mike O over there, he's a tutorial guy. Peters, lots of Peters. Pierre Richard. Nice to have you with us, Pierre. I sent you an email. Haven't had a response yet. Rob H., my mate in New Zealand, real expert in markets. Scott, always keen here. Scott, we're certainly going to deal with the S&P today in a big way. It's very interesting. Sue up in Cairns. Hi, Sue. Glad to have you with us. Tom in Florida. Tony D. up in Chicago. Bill Ford. And what does Tony say? Welcome, thank. Cold, very cold in Chicago, eh? Very cold in Chicago. Look, I don't know why you people put up with it. I don't know if Janet's with us. I haven't seen her here. She'll arrive shortly, I'm sure. And she's a long time Daniel Code lady, doing a third webinar, and trading's getting better and better. And she had a nasty fall and broke her ankle. And sent me some photos, unfortunate photos, for being loaded up into an ambulance, and she's really in a bad way. So, Janet, we all send you our best wishes. The point is, the photo she sent me, of course, there was sort of 3 foot of snow beside the sidewalk where she was, and I suppose ice on the sidewalk. She's a Canadian lady, West Coast, and boy, why do you people live there, honestly? Anyway, I'm sure there are lots of other benefits, and as long as you're all well and happy. So welcome today, and this is going to be a little bit different today, folks. I want to talk to you. I want to try and equip you for what's going to happen during the year, because as the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times, and certainly we do live in interesting times, and what's happening with the political scene in America is so interesting, riveting, fascinating, revolting, depending on your point of view. But the point to remember is it's going to have repercussions everywhere else around the world. And even though I'm a long way away from you in Australia, we have very similar lifestyles, very similar issues, and some of the issues that are going to affect countries like Australia, where we are probably the highest taxed nation in the world, is that if Trump gets corporate taxes down to 15% or somewhere near there, why our business is going to stay in Australia with 28% company tax, personal taxes that hit 48% fairly early, and another 2% Medicare levy on top of it. And once you've handed over just about half of your income to the government, every dollar you spend, you have a 10% GST, goods and services tax. So, of course, it's not really 10% because you've lost half already, haven't you? So it's really 20% on everything. And then almost anything else you can think of, there's a tax. You want to buy a car, there's a goods and services tax. You want to buy petrol, I think it's about 50 something cents a litre. We work in litres. Funny over here, I don't know why. We seem to follow California slavishly and everything else, including the design and colour of our road signs, but we want to follow Europe on things like measurements, litres and kilometres we have now, and have had for a long time, but about 45, 50 cents a litre in US, $1.40 in Australia, and the rest is all taxed. Quite incredible. You can't think of anything that's not taxed continuously and often. It's like vote early, vote often, isn't it? They want to tax you early and tax you often. Anyway, that wouldn't be the end of the world if they actually value added. Yeah, we call it goods and services tax, GST out here, to Batom. I know it's value added in the UK and Europe. Same thing, basically. It's just a rort to extract more money from us. And even that wouldn't be the end of the world if the money was spent wisely and sensibly. But, of course, as we all know, it's not. Starting with how politicians look after themselves. No one seems to be annoyed about that, apart from me. But we seem to see these scruffy characters get elected into Parliament, and then 3 months later they're wearing, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 suits. And as Hank says, how else are we going to pay for our polish? Well, I guess the answer is we shouldn't be paying them that at all. They think they like to kid us. They're giving us a service. They do this for service, Don't look to enrich yourselves from it. I suppose that's just too fantastical to even bear consideration, isn't it, Hank? Anyway, I got lots to tell you today, folks, and I figured that seeing as I'm getting older now, quite a lot older, I should tell you some home truths. I don't usually, but I'm happy today. I'm in a particularly forthcoming mood, and I think you're going to. Janet's joined us. Hello, this is the other Janet, Janet Christophs. Hello, Janet. Good to have you with us. Lots of people here just coming in, so excuse me for taking a few moments of your time, folks. Mike Pell's with us. Nathan's are here. All the Peters have arrived. Boy, look at them. People pouring in. It's been very hard for people to get in this morning for some reason. Maybe they were just a bit late coming to the party. Toddy over there in LA, south of LA. Todd Timmons, good mate of mine. He's a tutorial guy. Good to have you. And, of course, Vladimir Putin. We're always delighted to have you with us, whoever you are. Okay, so I want to talk to you about things I don't usually talk about for the first little part of this webinar, folks, on the basis that as age apparently keeps going on and on, it's wise that I tell you something of my accumulated knowledge. And I think 2017 is going to be a very, very difficult year for a lot of people who take what's happening seriously. I don't. I'm past the stage of worrying about anything, really. And I've seen it all before. And basically, it'll be okay. So don't overfret. We don't have any snowflakes on this website. If we do, they haven't made themselves known. But we did have one guy who wrote to me, was very cross, and I was talking about Donald Trump a couple of webinars ago. He might even still be with us. Albert, I think that was you. You berated me. See if he's here. I'm sure he is, actually. Yeah, Albert's still with us. Albert berated me about saying how much I admired Mr. Trump. Well, look, I admire him for a number of reasons. First of all, it's enormous entertainment value to those of us who live in the antipodes, where our politicians are all grey, boring, and incompetent. It's really exciting to see what's happening in your part of the world in the US. And it's also interesting to think about how this is going to impact a whole lot of other countries, which is something that people haven't really put their minds to much yet. Albert, I admire him for being forthright and truthful. I don't agree with everything he says, but I do admire the guy's guts and the sheer willpower. My observation is not that winning the election was the big thing. The big thing was winning the nomination, because he really, don't forget, he took on the Republican Party just as much in that. It was just as tough, maybe a tougher fight than when he went to the presidential election. So anyway, having dealt with that, let's move on, because we've got a whole lot to talk about today. And as usual, not a lot of time to talk about it. This next page, I think it should have changed for you, just let me check, is called An Honourable Life. And I want to set out for you my view of the world. The most honourable life, I think, much understated, is to be a self-employed trader. By that, you see, that's a fairly narrow definition. I don't mean people who work for corporations. I don't mean people who are involved in planting their servers next to the exchange server so they can see the data milliseconds or even whole seconds before the rest of us. I mean self-employed traders who work from a small office or from their home, most of them, and they have all the worthwhile attributes. You think about it. Traders are involved in managing risk every day. They're doing their own work by the sweat of their own brow. They are responsible for their own actions, which is a thing that not a lot of people can actually say anymore. And traders are wholly responsible for their own actions, good or bad. They're risking their own capital. They're putting at risk and in play every day their security, their family's security. And I have an enormous amount of regard for self-employed private traders, who are the backbone, of course, of the Daniel Code. Military and law enforcement people are all honourable. These are the people that we require to have any semblance of a rule of law. And the rule of law is something dear to my heart, not only because I'm an attorney, but because the rule of law is what sets us apart as civilized societies. And the rule of law is being degraded every day when you see elected officials, mayors, governors in America making statements that they will not uphold the law. If they are opposed to the law, they're still obliged to follow it. That is the rule of law. But when you have leaders, political leaders, community leaders, just saying straight out that they will refuse to follow the existing laws, that's a very bad breakdown the rule of law, and it sets a very bad example for everyone else. And that's happening a great deal. Those of you who are going to be in turmoil during the year with all the ups and downs and vagaries and excitements, I want you to read the Desiderata. And there's a link there, and I'm going to read you the first verse or two of it without taking much of your time. And it's pretty interesting that when I first heard of the Desiderata, it was let me see if I lost it here. I did have it. Here it is. It was presented as being, a lot of you have probably heard of it, or you'll know about it when I start to read it to you. It's actually a poem, and it was first presented to me as some ancient document that was found in the crypt of a very old church, and had been written by the monks, it was assumed. Well, that's not right. In fact, the Desiderata was written by an American, of all people. And when I say of all people, you'll contrast his writing and the message he's getting across with the turmoil, agony, and excitement that we're seeing in everyday life in America. And Max Ehrman was his name. He died. He wrote this in 1927. He was a poet, a writer. He was also an attorney. He was from Indiana, and he served a couple of terms as assistant district attorney. Apparently, he wasn't a terribly good attorney, because when he first published this document to a friend to make some copies and distribute it, he forgot to put a copyright notice on it. So he lost the copyright of it. And Rob, you're quite right. Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others. Even the dull and the ignorant, they too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexatious to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Okay, so there's much more of that, folks, at that link for the Desiderata. And of course, he also praises those who serve others. It's a very admirable thing to serve others. Let's move on and let's talk to you about the Daniel Code doctrine. Some of you will know this because I've been speaking about it for the best part of a year. And what's what I call war versus social. And you're going to need to understand this in 2017, because you're going to be assailed on all sides by controversy, by argument, by hate, and by civil disobedience, at least, and maybe worse. And what the argument that I've created and that I want to push to you is that if we strip our lives down to the most basic form, there are some things that are red lines, and they are the things that I entitle as war. They're the things that we have to protect. They're the things that are absolutely essential to us and to our family's well-being. And they're things like your income, a safe place of abode, the health and welfare of your children, your families, your larger family, your future, your personal future in life and in business and commerce, because your success is one of the major tools you need to wage this war to keep yourself and your family safe. Part of that is your health. You need to have your health. You need to be able to function efficiently. You need to be able to keep at the wheel of toil, probably longer than you think. And these are the things you need to wage war. Now, everything else is social. You think about the muddled media we have now. This whole media is a curse. We have the 24-hour news cycle, and then we have more and more people competing for that cycle. We start with traditional media, newspapers and such, many of which are on their way out now, reduced to websites, electronic media. We have bloggers. We have all sorts of people competing for this media space. And what we now know, and what I have known for a long time, but what at least now it's being talked about, is false news. And be careful where you're getting your media from. I read 7 newspapers a day, a couple of which are centre, sort of biased, and the rest of which are all very much on the left, or liberal as you would call them. And it's quite extraordinary that you can have the identical same factual story presented in 2 completely opposed ways. And the headlines really are what tries to tell the story. And you just can't rely. News is no longer news. News now, there's 99% opinion. It's spun, it's buffeted, it's twisted. And if you're just getting your news from one source, you're likely to be infected with that bias. And as intelligent people, you're all traders, or going to be traders, either now or in the future. You have to be balanced, and you have to, I mean really balanced, not like Fox News balanced, much as I enjoy them. What they are not is balanced and fair. But anyway, that's all part of the spin, isn't it? So all of these other issues are social, and you really don't have to worry about them too much, folks. If you look at your daily news diet, your social interaction, your involvement with people in the workplace and elsewhere, almost everything you're talking about is social. It's not war, so it doesn't matter. Okay? War are those red lines that have to be protected, that has to be kept safe. You have to have your fortress family. That's what you're here for. That's your job, to ensure their safety and their future. Those are the things of war. And countries too have things that are war. And I suspect we're going to nudge a bit closer to that as the next couple of years develop. But remember, everything else is social, and social is really of no account. Giving the gift of unfiltered communication to the great unwashed may seem like the second coming. Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, they're the only ones I know. There's probably 100 more. But really what you've done, it's been a wonderful social experiment. Let's give a voice to the great unwashed, who also happen to be the great uninformed. So all you're doing is you're turning this world more and more into an echo chamber where the voices of informed, responsible, reasonable people are drowned out in favor of the mob. So, what's the big news? What's the great excitement? Facebook, Twitter, this stuff. I don't even have a mobile phone. In fact, that's not quite true. I have a version of a mobile phone. I have I think it was $47 mobile phone that I bought in New Zealand 12 years ago, and it still works fine. It can actually even send and receive text. And my children have taught me how to text with one finger. But the point is that nobody knows that number except my family. It's just, and my gardener, I should say. It's just for personal communication with my family. If they need to contact me, they can. And they don't very often, but that's the only reason I have a phone. On the other hand, my children have iPhones. My wife has an iPhone. And honestly, these damn things are going ding, 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 day and night. They love chatting to their friends. They're social creatures. In fact, I often wonder how we were so social in our day before there was even such a thing as the internet, let alone small mobile phones. But it's also true that they've opened up potential for huge abuse. Honestly, to see some of this stuff that is published in Twitter and elsewhere is really, truly vile. That leads us to this question of the rule of law. This is what sets civilized societies apart. And it's being trashed more and more from the mayors of sanctuary cities in America who say straight out, we are not going to enforce the law. We are going to disregard the law. Great minds always seem to think alike. I just caught the tail end of a program my wife was watching as I came in with my latest cup of coffee, and it was Bill O'Reilly talking about this, and the mayors of various sanctuary cities saying, well, we know what the law is and we're just going to ignore it. We're going to avoid it. We're going to work actively to ensure it doesn't come to our city. It's a ridiculous proposition. I know it's the liberal position, but there is a significant part of the population. This is not just limited to America. What happens in America, if it hasn't already gone somewhere else, it'll be copied really fast. We see that in Australia and New Zealand every day. This trampling on the rule of law. If my leaders don't have to obey the law, I don't have to obey the law. And we get these, in my view, disgusting, violent marches and protests. Everybody in civilized Western countries has a constitutional right to protest, but peaceful protest. Once it gets to the stage that it's vandalism, it's foul language. I mean, goodness, the Women's March taught me some words I didn't think I'd hear on the media. Um, but remember, as society disintegrates, the rule of law is the only thing that is going to protect you. I know that many Americans think that the rule of law won't protect them. That's why they have guns. But don't forget that even your right to use guns in lawful self-defense is part of the rule of law. And what's missing, what I notice most, is manners. I suppose I'm going to become my father now. This is what happens as you get old. You become your father. Girls become their mother. And I'm going to bemoan the youth of today. I mean, the young people I see in public are truly scary. They're bad-mannered. They have no respect. I was going to say for their elders, but actually no respect for anyone, for a whole lot of them. And undoubtedly, there are also some very good and decent, hard-working young people who are going to be our next generation of leaders. But manners is what's missing. People are getting married so young these days, and my observation is trashy parents raise trashy children, and we're seeing far too many of those. And don't forget that in people who say that they are actively exercising their individual freedoms can, if they're not careful, too often abuse the freedoms of others. David, yes, alternate facts. Okay, let's move on. These are the great truths of 2017, and I hope some of this offends you. I'm sure it will. But those of you who've ever been on a racetrack or played rugby will know the first three by heart. They're a litany of perhaps the 60s, and those three great truths are: all men die, all punters go broke, all women are mad. Some of you have heard me say that. Well, we know all men die. Not all punters go broke. Punters are people who gamble particularly at the horse racing or the trots or the dogs, or gamble on sport or any other sort of gamblers. They're punters. And all women are mad. I'm not sure what sort of mad that is. Does that mean that they're mad like I'm crazy, I'm sick of it, I've had enough, and I'm not going to take it anymore? Because that's what we saw in this massive women's march that was all over the world. And it seriously was a big event. The emotion of it was extraordinary. The language of it was incredible. The idiots who garnered the headlines should be ashamed of themselves. But it was interesting that the underlying message about this, don't forget, this was not open to all women. It was only open to women who were pro-abortion. And I know that's a thing that's not talked about in polite society, but it's the real issue for women when they say they want control of their bodies, they want access to free contraception, access to free abortion on demand. That's basically the extreme end of the Women's March. And I'm sure there are all sorts of median views in between there. But the groups that tried to affiliate themselves with the Women's March who are anti-abortion, they were not allowed to participate. So you can put a highlight on that. And universal health care will solve a lot of those problems. I'm going to talk to you about that on the next slide. And the other part of the great truth, all of which are being revealed, is that mainstream media are biased, dishonest. Steve Bannon's comment today, the media should be embarrassed and humiliated, keep its mouth shut and just listen for a while. Steve Bannon, of course, is the ex-editor of Breitbart, a very right-wing website, news website in America, who's now Donald Trump's senior advisor and was his campaign manager in the later part of his campaign, and along with Kellyanne and a couple of other leaders. What he's talking about is the media's comments on politics, but it's more than that. It's the inherent bias. For those of you who live in Australia, get a copy of the Australian one day and get a copy of the Sydney Morning Herald. One is centre, maybe centre-right occasionally. Probably not. Murdoch is more central, centrist, and the other one is Fairfax Group, which is a left-wing liberal. Get a copy of both those papers and sit down and just read through the first 2 or 3 pages. You'll wonder if they're talking about the same country. And in America, that divergence is more so. You look at the mainstream media there against the further right websites, the Breitbarts, those sorts of things. Honestly, black is white, white is black, chalk is cheese. So make sure, because you are in the business of being informed, rational people, being traders, make sure you get your media from across wide enough sources that you see both sides of the argument. Make up your mind for yourself. Universal health service. This is this huge issue burning up America. Obamacare was an attempt at it. Right, what can I do? Terry's telling me my volume has gone. Hello, let me check my volume for you. Now it's back. Sorry if you missed that, folks. We're talking about universal health care. Terry told me I just had a drop out of volume. It's back now. This is a burning issue in America, and I'm not quite sure why it is, because universal health care these days is pretty much accepted as a basic service in advanced countries. It's doable. It's being done in many countries. I was always a bit bemused during the introduction of Obamacare why this was so hard, why there were so many insurmountable issues. There's been universal health care in Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, since the war, since soon after the war, not that long after the war. It probably started 8 or 10 years after the Second World War. But for decades now, there have been very satisfactory universal health services in almost all the Western world except America. So the real issue for America, as I understand it, is that health cuts across these issues of the independence of states, and nowhere in the world are the states more independent than they are in America. But that, that's simply a mechanical problem, Obamacare was never going to work because the power of the insurance companies wasn't broken. How universal health care works in the vast majority of the world that has it is that you have some form of a universal insurer. You wouldn't even know it in Australia because there's lots of insurance companies competing for your business, but they are totally controlled as to what they can offer and what they can charge by the federal government. Now, in Australia, the provision of health services it's a state issue, the same as it is in America. But they've managed to get people together and say, this is how it's going to be. Now, Australia, we only have 5 states and a couple of territories. That's a big difference, I know, to 50 states plus in America, plus the history of American states, the history of independence, the huge difference in background from the historical perspective of American states. But look, it's not reinventing the wheel, folks. It's doable. It's being done almost everywhere else in the Western world. There may be slight glitches you need here and there, but a universal health service is marvelous. Okay? Let me give you an example of New Zealand. The guy who goes into a private hospital for very expensive surgery today and pays for it himself because he's in a bracket he can, as I have done. Next person to come into his bed might be a lumberjack who got hit by a truck or hit by a log and broke his leg. They get exactly the same service from similar sorts of qualified people. It's marvelous. My brother-in-law is the chief neurosurgeon in the South Island of New Zealand. And he has a private practice. He works for the state most of the time at a very modest salary. This is one of the most highly qualified neurosurgeons in the world. He travels all around the world, including the States and Britain and Europe, lecturing on the latest techniques. He works for the state most of the time on a very modest salary, but they give him X number of hours of theatre time funded by the state, operating theatre, plus nurses, anaesthetiologists, everything else he needs. And he has a small portion of that he can use for his private practice. So it's not socialism. The capitalistic element is still there, but part of that capitalistic choice is subsumed to provide for the community. Part of it is attributed to the greater good. And it's absolutely marvellous, the health services in New Zealand. Australia, pretty much the same thing. Europe, much the same. Britain, also the same. They have some particular problems there, that they have a bureaucratic nightmare. But the theory is largely the same. And that's funded depending on it's a progressive scale of earnings. You pay a percentage of your taxable earnings towards that cost. If you want to, you can have private insurance on top of it for gold-plated hot and cold running water, anything else you want. You're entitled to do that if you want to. And in some countries, New Zealand, for example, you pay a small fee every time you go to see a doctor. You pay, when I was there, it was $11. It might be $15 now. As opposed to that, you take a country like Australia, an immensely wealthy country. Government says we've got a problem with this ongoing funding because healthcare funds, healthcare pricing is the fastest rising sector of the business world. Healthcare costs are high-tech, high labour intensive. They're spiralling madly. Australian government says we'd like you to make a contribution every time you go to see a doctor. Pay $3. It's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. I mean, you know, people are just totally unreasonable. That is a very, very, you have to have a price signal if you're not going to fall down into total and abject socialism. You have to have a price signal no matter how minute. So universal health solves all these women's health problems. I mean, you know, I've been accused of being a misogynist. My children think I'm a misogynist now. Nothing could be further than the truth. Misogynist is a man who hates women. I love women. I adore women. I've had lots of lady friends and many wives as well, in fact. And I adore women. So I'm certainly not a misogynist, but I don't have a particularly high view of women as a group. Now, that's not being a misogynist because I don't have a particularly high view of men either. I'm been a lawyer long enough to now be immune to the disappointments that the human race serves up. But, you know, you have to be concerned about the Women's March, not only in Washington, but it was echoed all over the world. Women have demands for what they see as their basic rights, and they're not getting it. And I don't understand why that's an issue. My 21-year-old daughter, who's a very progressive young lady, she's a lecturer at a prominent university in Australia at the age of 21, doing her PhD, doing a doctorate. She's a liberal. You can't help it, can you? You bring up your children as decent, middle-of-the-road people, send them to university, they come back as liberals. Fortunately, it doesn't last forever. But she's a liberal, and she engaged me the other morning in a conversation about what were my thoughts about abortion. And it's not something that I'm used to talking about. It's not something that I'm even comfortable talking about. But I said to her that we're blessed in this country, Australia and New Zealand, my equal homes. I'm spend probably as much time in New Zealand as I do in Australia, and looking forward to going back there when circumstances permit, the kids finish university. We're blessed to have this universal health system. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a matter entirely between women and their doctor. I mean, it's nothing to do with me. I don't understand legislators wanting to push down conditions on women about their own health. I know there are religious motives behind this. I'm a practicing Christian. I understand the arguments about right to life. I understand the arguments that abortion is killing a fetus, killing a young person, the new heartbeats bill that was introduced to Congress. Understand all that. But do unto others as you would have done unto you. I don't force my views on other people. I don't want them to force their views on me. You think about that in our political system. So much of this anger and angst, rage, is caused by a perception that someone else is forcing their opinion, their standards onto you. We've got to think of a more sensitive way of doing that, folks. And I'm certainly not a snowflake. Okay, never forget when this conversation, because it's going to be a big one for America, replacing Obamacare, greed, corruption, and entrenched interest. Big pharma, hospitals, massive institutions, huge available funds for lobbying, political favors, greed, corruption, entrenched interest. Think also when you're weighing up these arguments. In fact, this doesn't only apply to healthcare, it applies to anything you read. An old saying on the racecourse, always back self-interest, at least you know it's trying. It's the same with all of this media stuff. When you read something from the media, ask yourself, who is this person? What are his political affiliations? Because 99% of what you read is opinion. They're trying to get across their point of view of the world. And it probably isn't accurate. At least what we can be sure of is it's not the only view. Okay, so there's some thoughts for you. Let's move on. My great excitement these days, Rob, this, yes, quite right. Rob's making the point. Healthcare funding, big default at present rates, mismatch between the retiring population numbers and declining workforce. China will be the first to get too old before it's economically powerful. Let's hope that that's so, Rob. I'm sure economically you're right. You're an expert. But with China, let's hope they get old and lose some of their enthusiasm, because they're going to be severely challenged in the Yellow Sea if the incoming Secretary of State in the US is to be believed. I have been saying to you people, some of you I know have been with me for years and years and years, I've been saying to you for years and years that this whole Australian property myth is a bubble, and that it's untruthful. And we've been hearing for years and years and years now that all property, depending where it is, I mean, exceptions for, extreme waterfront views, etc., but median property, 4 times median income. And I've been saying for years that's rubbish. It's 8 plus. Anyway, the first time I've seen it published, we got some information from a reputable publication called Demographia that's undertaken a large survey of international house prices, and they've expressed them as median house price as a multiple of median income, because people have to buy houses. The situation in the Southern Hemisphere, well, you've got it too in the Northern Hemisphere, as you'll see from the next table. But in Australia and New Zealand, it's frankly ridiculous. Sydney, second only to Hong Kong at 12.3 times income for the median house price, which is now over $1 million, the median. And boy, when you see what the median looks like, let me tell you, you don't want to live there. It's over $1 million. It's absurd. Melbourne, our second largest city, 4th on the world list. Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth, the other big cities here, all severely unaffordable. And all the old myths regurgitated all the time. You remember what I said to you? Can everyone hear me all right? Terry's saying he's having trouble. He's in Canada. Just type into the questions box, folks, would you, if you can hear me all right? I don't actually know what we can do about. Yeah, Tuba Tom can. Coffs Harbour's good. Okay, Janet's good. Yeah, most of them are good. Mike, all over America. Okay, thank you, folks. Well, Donnie Maydell's up in Canada. He's good. A lot of clients we have in Canada. David's saying varies up and down. I'm sorry, folks. There's nothing really we can do about it. Terry, I suppose if we're going to lose the audio now, we're going to lose a bit of it on the recording as well. But anyway, let's keep going, folks. We'll do our best. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune on the internet are beyond our control. So all of these old myths that housing is affordable, it's not a bubble, blah, blah, blah. You got to remember the 2 major websites in Australia, and the same in America with Zillow the other one, Red something or other, they're owned by the established media. Real Estate Commo is owned by Murdoch. Domain is owned by the Fairfax Group. Same thing. Newspapers used to get the vast majority of their revenue from real estate advertising. This is in the days of real paper newspapers, and then it's their websites now that get all that revenue. They are constantly promoting a single theme. Property is not expensive. It's great value. You've got to own property. Buy now before the prices go up. And it's rubbish. And I'm glad that it's now come out, at least what I've been saying for at least 2 years. Australian property, 8 to 10 to 12 times now average earnings to buy the average house. You work out how that's possible to fund that, given the rules that we know that are enforced from lenders. And the answer is it can't be done. So my next question is, if that's so, how is it being done? Because I have not been able to get an answer to that for a long time. Here's the actual table, folks. It's a list of the 10 least affordable major housing markets. Hong Kong's on the top, but I mean, Hong Kong's tiny. You know, you'd fit into a decent-sized cow paddock, and millions and millions and millions of people. That shouldn't even be on the list. Sydney, top of the list. Vancouver, we know what's been going on there with the Chinese buying. This is large part of this in Australia, at least, certainly Vancouver and Auckland, New Zealand, is being caused by immigration and tax incentives. Immigrants are pouring into these centres. Governments don't seem to have a clue. There's certainly no willingness at all to put a tap down on immigration. Australia's official, this is a country of 22 million people, its official immigrant intake each year is 200,000. With family reunions and other little slip-throughs, it's about 450,000 a year. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And they all go where the jobs are, which is Sydney and Melbourne. Same thing in New Zealand. They all go to Auckland. And look about the rest of these places in the US. San Jose, Honolulu, I understand that. I'd love to go there myself. Los Angeles, San Francisco. Crazy stuff. We're going to see, Janet, quite right, negative gearing. You'll see at the top of this slide, it says reality comes from policy, immigration and tax incentives. Of course, certainly in our part of the world, I know it's entirely different in America, in our part of the world, there's no deduction for interest on your principal place of residence, but you can buy a second house, an investment property, and that you can have. You can deduct all your interest expenses, your operating expenses. You can gear it up to 100%, 120% leverage. Get all your interest deducted, so you never make a taxable profit on your income. And then when you go to sell it, you have a 50% rebate in the capital gains tax. So policy, immigration, and tax incentives. Negative gearing, immigration. Janet says here, 357 visas. Are the banks pushing the immigration agenda so their loan books are increasing? Bill, all the time, and not just the banks. Big business wants lots and lots of new cheap labour. They think by promoting that they can weaken the powers of the trade unions. They can get access to cheap labour. It's what this whole immigrant issue in California is about. They can't bring in the crops without immigrants. Same in Australia. They can't, the crops that need to be hand-picked, they can't do it. There are not enough Australians don't want to go and work in those conditions for lousy money. So they issue these temporary visas to backpackers. You can come and spend a year in Australia and be a backpacker, travel around, but you've got to spend 6 weeks picking fruit for one of these contractors. Now, don't hold me those exact numbers, but you get the idea. It's the same sort of thing as happening in the agricultural centre in the US. Excuse me. And let's talk about unconscionable conduct. Our taxes are ridiculous. Those of you who keep telling me America's a high-tax country, let me tell you that in Australia you get to 48% income tax quite early. Then you have a 2% levy for your government-provided Medicare, it's called, medical services, universal health care. So there's 50%. And then you pay 10% goods and services tax on every dollar you spend after that. But of course, it's not 10%, is it? Because half's gone already. It's that 10%. It's 10% on the 50% you've got left, so it's 20%. The highest tax country in the world. The black cash economy here is enormous. I'm always amazed. Go to your big supermarket and see the ladies paying, and 8 out of 10 are opening their wallets and pulling out $100 notes or $50 notes. Now, in this modern age where all of your wages are paid by direct debit, people are not going to the bank saying, give me hundreds and hundreds so I can give it to my wife. This is a picture, this is a symptom of the cash economy, the black cash economy. Biggies avoid tax. This might shock you. Google, Microsoft, BHP and Uber between them paid less than $150,000 in income tax in the 2014-15 tax year in Australia. Can you believe it? Billions upon billions upon billions of dollars of revenue, pay no tax. Very complicated, sophisticated tax schemes based on offshore transfer pricing. If you and I did it, we'd be locked up. It's totally illegal. If you do it at big enough scale, it's called a marketing hub, and it's a joke. Governments are incompetent negotiators, so we never get the revenue into government that we should. Australia is now the largest exporter of natural gas in the world. Multi-year schemes to develop all this underground and under the ocean natural gas. Guess how much Australia collects in royalties for its natural gas and resource taxes? Try a guess. Try zero. Nothing. Zero. Because that's how the government were dudded in the negotiations. And that's not an isolated incident. What Trump says is right. Governments keep making bad deals. Don't forget, governments are inherently corrupt. Governments are clients, and they're beholden to their clients. On the left of the spectrum, money flows to the trade unions and organised labour. On the right of the spectrum, money flows to the big businesses. I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other. They're both crooked. This goes on and on, doesn't it? But what you can bet is funds flow to the big end of town always. In these richest countries in the world, there's never enough money to look after the poor, the sick, the needy. The ones who really need government help don't get it. Absolutely don't get it. Janet says, yes, Australia's recognised a major money laundering site. So is New Zealand, funnily enough, through its trust laws over there. Understanding and compassion. An alcoholic's dream is to be locked overnight in the Jim Beam factory. Students want free education. Why do you think Bernie Sanders was such a success? Get up in front of a bunch of alcoholics and say, I'm going to give you an all-expenses-paid weekend. We're going to lock you up in the Jim Beam factory. Of course they're going to vote for you. Jump in front of a bunch of students and say, we're going to give you all free education, not loan you the money and you've got to pay it back when you're working. That's the situation now. We're going to give you all your free education. We're going to forgive your student debt. Of course they go nuts for it. Most people want free and high-end quality health care. Note the word free. Motorists want good roads, no traffic hassles. Everyone wants freedom, which must first be earned and then protected. But there is a cost to all goods and services. And the fair and rational allocation of the resources of the state requires a degree of understanding and compassion. And at the moment, on my observation of all of the Western economies, there is very little understanding and almost no compassion. Okay, all right, all of the above, folks, was social. Let's finish with that. That's my diatribe for the week, maybe for the month, possibly even for the year. Let's get back on to war, our business of making money. That's what we do. This chart you're now looking at, somebody asked me to particularly look at the S&P and where it was. I've got it here. Just bear with me a second. Was it Scott? Scott Lewis, you asked for this. Really interesting, a good point you raised there, Scott, because we've got a really interesting divergence about what's happening here. This is the 6-day chart. To get a full view of analysis, you've got to use different time frames. This is the S&P index, the 6-day chart. And yeah, I know it's making new highs. I know all that stuff, folks. I trade this as well as you do. Maybe I trade a whole lot better. But if you have a look, when we look at the angular view as opposed to just the linear view, this market is weak. We had a close outside the 2 standard deviations from the mean. That's down here back in February last year. Then we've had a clawback, and it's crawling up the bottom dotted line. That's 2 standard deviations from the mean. Compared to the historical strength of this rally, the present move up is very, very weak on this time frame, which is the 6-day chart. Let's move on now to confuse you a bit more. This is the 12-day chart, and the point Scott made was he thought that it was back at the median. Well, it's very close to it, Scott, the middle line there, that the solid blue line that then goes on with the dotted line, that's the median. Now, this is the 12-day chart. This is showing you a different picture. This is showing you that the market has got back onto its long-term trend, and it's about to recover the median. That means this market has regained all of its strength. Okay, have a look at that number above it, 2329. It's one of our targets. Let's move on now. This is our long-term trend chart. This is the 24-day chart. This shows you the same story as the 12. It's recovered 1 standard deviation from the mean. It's heading very close to the median, and if it continues on this trajectory, it will be at the median towards the end of May this year. And it's going to be interesting. I had so much I want to talk to you about what's going to happen with Trump and America, what's going to happen with Congress. Understand. Terry's saying he's lost sound again, folks. If this is happening to you, I do apologize. There's nothing we can do about it at the moment. It's obviously somewhere in the system between me and you. This whole issue of Trump's agenda, it's going to take massive amounts of money, large amounts of legislation. That's thank you, Gardner. Said it's been good. That's a conflict with what a lot of Republicans believe, certainly in conflict with almost all the Democrats. But don't forget, Trump's initial fight was with the Republicans. He's not a traditional Republican. He was a Democrat. He stood as a Republican as a matter of convenience, but his fight's with the Republicans, in my view, as much as it's with the Democrats. And everyone's going along with him at the moment because he's immensely popular, and no one wants to rock the boat. Trump has campaigned so well and so powerfully that arguably, if he put his mind to it and wanted to actively campaign against a congressman or a senator, I think almost all of them would think they're in a bit of trouble. So no one's rocking the boat, but I promise you it's going to come, and probably sooner than you think. I don't think it's in the first 100 days, but it may well be May, June, even through to August. I think you're going to see this conflict, and how it gets resolved, it's going to create a lot of tension and some real problems. It leads us to our other issues. So let's get through here so we can look at some of these currency charts. This is free trials, folks. If you haven't already, you're most welcome to have a free trial of everything at the Daniel Code. Just click on the banner on the front page, register a username and password, email your username to Terry at support@thedanielcode.com. He'll turn you on for a 31-day free trial if you like. He can arrange a free trial with Genesis Trade Navigator of their software for you as well. Johnny Barnes, John's only 40 k's away from you, Terry. No problem here. Must be your internet. A couple of other people have said it comes and goes, John, but thanks for that, mate, up there in frosty Canada. So do go ahead, please, if you haven't already. Take a free trial of the website. See what's here for you, see what parts you find interesting, what suits you. And when you seriously get ready to make money, let me know. I'll be happy to teach you Daniel Code trading. Excuse me, that'll be of great interest. Okay, here's our compliance statement, folks. I always like you to read this. Trading futures and Forex is risky. You can lose a lot of money. If you don't know what you're doing, you can lose a huge amount of money very, very quickly. I suggest that you learn to trade before you risk any real money trading. Let's move on. I have a number of charts I want to show you. Let's look at this first issue. God, this is going to knock your socks off. This is the Dow. It should be about changing for you now. You should be able to see it any moment now. This is the Dow. Look at the Dow. The Dow is at the median. This is the same thing. This is a 24-day chart. This is the long-term trend chart of the Dow. These blue lines, this is a valid Daniel Code trading channel, which has contained this market since the March 2009 lows. Perfectly, the Dow is back at the medium. It's also at the first of our targets, 2031, close today, 2052. And I am going to start worrying about this market shortly, maybe already. I don't know that this speed of movement can be maintained. We've seen it before, let's face it. Back in 2011, we saw a burst from 2 standard deviations to the mean. We've now seen a burst from 2 standard deviations to the mean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably in about the same time, but faster 3. These 24-day charts are basically a Daniel Code monthly chart equivalent, 22 days in an average month trading days. So don't forget, what goes up must go down sometime or other. The pressure of the money that's going to be spent in fulfilling Trump's agenda. I know America, enormously wealthy country, can afford whatever its citizens want, and I'm sure there's enough people thinking about how we're going to America's going to deal with funding all of this. They'll need some innovation and some good ideas for sure. They'll also need some goodwill from their citizens, and they're not getting a lot of that from half of them right now. Sergi, what's my view on the dollar? Very important. Very important, Sergi. Too, with the Titanic its eyes. Here we are. Here's the dollar. Let's go and have a look at the US dollar index. Vital for a number of reasons. First reason is this is the US dollar index. We had it trading in a range for from February 2015 until December 2016. It was trading within that range of 100.84 down to about 91.5. We've had a breakout now and a reversal. What's doubly important about this, remember, is at the moment gold is inversely correlated to the dollar. All of the movement in gold can be attributed to the dollar. I showed that to you in the last tutorial. If you haven't seen it, it's on the Daniel Code website. You can go back through these past tutorials and see this stuff. But dollar up, gold down, dollar down, gold up. The new treasurer, Munchen, however you pronounce his name, I haven't heard it done yet, M-N-U-C-H-N, he said 2 days ago the US dollar's too high. Remember, with all this massive pressure that Trump's putting on corporations to build their manufacturing inside the United States, to bring back manufacturing into the United States. If you want to use it in America, build it in America. That's the issue he's pushing. The quid pro quo for that is going to be a number of things. One of them is going to be much less regulation. The second one is going to be organized labor being reasonable. The third one is going to be a weak US dollar. Okay, that is going to be an essential part of the funding issues for America. The institution, the American institution, that is Treasury, are going to be pressing for a lower dollar all the time, Sergi. So we'll see this go back into the range. It may take a little while to work out, but I think the odds favor a downward trajectory for the dollar, particularly to appease the corporates who might give the opinion they're nodding their head to Trump and saying, yes, sir, whatever you want. I assure you they're not. What they're saying is, you're asking us to do something incredibly hard. average hourly earnings for an automobile worker in America of $28 to $29. This is very basic without all the add-ons. In China, $1.50. Go figure yourself. If you're going to have to load that much labor onto manufacturing, they're going to be looking for every trade-off they can get to soften the blow. The most obvious one is a weaker US dollar, which is going to be bad luck for everyone else involved, Sergio, including my country. Okay, let's have a look at these issues that they're talking about with the US dollar. This is a massive, massive issue, and you're going to see this. This is the Australian dollar. It traded up here at, $1.108. Absolutely scandalous. How the Australian dollar can ever be worth more than the US dollar is absolutely beyond me. It's a country that milks cows, grows sheep and wool and crops, and digs up its natural resources and sends them overseas, sells them to the nearest or readiest buyer. Very little natural add, very little processing, very basic economy, really. I know everyone likes to think it's sexy and progressive, but it's not. It's a very basic economy. But look at this. Look what this picture is here. Okay, so this means Australian dollar weak. This is pointing down. Let's look at the other. This is not a terribly important market to America. Let's look at the ones that are. This is the euro. And boy, look at this. Same thing. The euro is an absolute disgrace. I don't know why Trump isn't screaming about this more. Look at this. This is how they've managed to weaken the euro. Now, we can go back in history long before this, but in relevant terms to legislators and the people who actually make these decisions, it's recent trend that they're dealing with. And the euro, they've managed to absolutely debase the euro against the US dollar. And what does this mean? The euro is much cheaper than it should be. That means their exports, it's easier for their exports, and their imports are more expensive. So they're incentivizing their exports. This is what Trump said about the EU. It's just a game for Germany to sell their products to the rest of Europe. That's probably pretty cruel, but anyway, that's what he said. Here's GBP. Have a look at this. You've seen this chart a few times. This was our last waterfall signal. Same thing. See what the recent trend in this market is? Boy, nasty. Look at this. Eh? GBP, down the toilet compared to the USD. Move on to all of them. New Zealand just doesn't matter. This is the other way round. This has put the US dollar first. This is the argument with China. Look how this is the US dollar getting stronger. That is the yen weaker. Okay, this is dollar strength, yen weakness. It makes China's exports to America much cheaper in real terms, and America's exports to China, not that there's all that many of them, but much more expensive in real terms. This is this war that's going. This is the currency war that's bubbling along underneath all of this. And let's move on. I think there's one other one to look at, and this is dollar yen. This is the same way as this is the US dollar first in this pair. So we put our little arrow on, and this is, okay, this is dollar strength, yen weakness. And you can see since September 2011, this thing's pretty much been on a tear. I know it's had a big correction in the early parts of 2016, but this is the problem facing America, that every other country that matters in a trading sense has managed to weaken their currency very substantially against the US. And now the US is going to try and weaken the dollar. And that is a currency war. Okay, folks, that's all I have for you today. As usual, I've gone past my allotted time. And I thank you for your questions and comments. I particularly thank you for your attendance with us here today. I'm sorry about the sound. Nothing we can do about it. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Tom wants to look at the gold chart. Let's see where we've got that. DC Weekly is where we keep the gold chart. Here you are, Tuber Tom, as usual. Have a look at this thing, just bouncing around on these Daniel code numbers. Here's the rally. This was a four seal low we told you about before it happened. Have a look how this market loves the Daniel code numbers. The high of this bar, which is January this year, 1207.2 against the Daniel code blue line at 1208.1. Remember, this is a weekly chart, so it's not as accurate as we get it in the daily charts. Then have a look at this one here. This is the next bar. This is the high in January. Further bounce up. Look where it's closed, 1210.2. The red line at 1211.5. That's 0.7, and there's 12,000 ticks in 1,211 points. Is 12,000 ticks. So 7 ticks variance in 12,000. It's absolutely extraordinary. If you want to know what's happening with markets, Tom, you need to look at the Daniel code charts, and we publish daily charts for a number of Forex and gold markets twice a week. And they're on the members' website. You're most welcome to see them. The only thing, Daniel code is the only trading program I'm aware of that gives you specific targets by number. And it's all mathematical. It's not old highs or old lows. It's certainly not Fibonacci. It gives you the numbers, and markets track those numbers. They're like magnets. Okay, that's it, folks. Thank you for being with me, and bless you. And I'm still allowed to say that, aren't I? I know people get offended by that these days. People get offended by everything. Anyway, it started to rain here, which we need desperately. We're in the middle of summer, very hot here. Sort of, those sort of low 90s most days. Very nice. Nice bit of rain makes the lawn grow, makes the garden grow. So thank you for being with us, folks. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye. Yeah, Hank wants the rain, said John Lisbeth. Okay, Rob, thank you, my friend. Look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.